It could take more than 5 years for international air travel to bounce back, and countries enforcing quarantine periods aren't helping, according to IATA. The International Air Transport Association wants what it calls harmonised border controls, where countries collectively agree to rules aimed at protecting against COVID-19, including temperature checks at airports, masks on planes and instant tests when they become available. But IATA opposes mandatory isolation like the 2 weeks New Zealand enforces for travellers returning home from overseas. And it maintains conditions on a plane are safer than shopping at the mall or going into the office when it comes to the spread of COVID-19. I spoke to IATA's Asia spokesperson, Albert Tjoeng, about
We're expecting recovery to be slow. So we've developed two scenarios. In the very first scenario, which is the more optimistic scenario, we expect domestic markets to open in the third quarter of the year and a much slower phased opening of international markets. We don't expect 2019 levels to be exceeded until 2023. That's a couple of years from now. And even by 2025, global passenger demand is still expected to be 10% below what we had originally forecasted for the year in 2019. That's the more optimistic scenario. There's also a pessimistic scenario where if the opening of economies and the relaxation of travel restrictions is slow, with lockdowns extending into the third quarter of the year, then even by 2021, we expect passenger demand to be 34% below 2019 levels.
What is it that is keeping it from bouncing back more quickly? Is it health concerns? Is it that people don't want to spend the money when things are uncertain? Because economies are expected to come back much quicker than what you're expecting aviation to.
So there are a couple of factors. One is confidence in air travel. The other factor would be in terms of the state of the economy. People will be concerned that if the economy isn't going to do well, then finances would be a consideration to determine whether or not they travel.
New Zealand has compulsory quarantine and isolation at the moment. So anyone entering the country has to spend 2 weeks in isolation. Now, IATA doesn't support quarantine. Why?
So we've done a survey of travellers, and we found that if arrival quarantine measures are in place, travellers will not have the confidence in wanting to travel. There's no incentive to travel because if you are travelling and you're stuck in a quarantine compound for about 2 weeks, then that really reduces any incentive to want to travel. Which is why what we are proposing is to have a layered approach of biosecurity measures, where there are measures in place at the departing airport, on in-flight, there are measures at the arrival airport. So it's a layered approach to ensure that there are biosecurity measures in place to protect the health and safety of travellers.
Like what, though? Because people are deeply concerned about the risks associated with COVID-19. What would minimise that? What are you suggesting specifically?
So in the layered approach, we are looking at things, for example, temperature screening at airports. We are to have a robust system of health declarations and vigorous contact tracing procedures. In flight, we are recommending the use of face coverings or masks while in the aircraft to simplify boarding and deplaning process, the processes for boarding and deplaning, such that it reduces contact between passengers and crew, even simplifying catering procedures while on board the aircraft to lower the crew movement and interaction with passengers.
But you don't support social distancing. So at the moment in New Zealand, we do have social distancing on public transport, including it's supposed to be on planes. So is that simply because it's not financially viable for airlines to implement social distancing?
So there are a couple of factors why the risk of transmission on board the aircraft has been low. So unlike other modes of transport, everybody sitting in the aircraft faces forward, and there's limited face-to-face interaction. Seats actually provide a physical barrier or to the transmission from the back to the front of between the back and the front of the aircraft. Even the airflow within the aircraft, within the cabin, is from the ceiling to the floor. Hence, it reduces any potential for transmission forward or back in the cabin. Even with the air circulation system itself, the cabin air is clean to the level of an operating theatre quality. So hence, the risk, even currently, the risk of transmission is low. Added to that measure, the use of face masks and coverings, it will reduce the risk even lower. Hence, we are not recommending keeping the middle seats empty.
So can you compare it to any other activities, like the risk of flying, for example, compared to shopping at the local mall or going into the office? Which is riskier?
The risk is definitely lower in an aircraft cabin, given the quality of the air, given the physical barriers that are in the aircraft, given the nature in which people are seated in the aircraft facing forward, the risk is lower.
New Zealand is in a situation where it has one domestic carrier, Air New Zealand. And I know that IATA has done a lot regarding refunds and passengers wanting refunds. At the moment, Air New Zealand is locked in a rather large battle with its customers wanting refunds. What is your position on that?
The airline industry is in crisis mode. This year, we are expecting 314 billion in revenue loss for the airline industry. If in the second quarter of the year alone, airlines are expected to burn about 61 billion of their cash. So it's an unprecedented situation that the airlines are in. What they need to do is to conserve their cash so that they can survive. And why states need the airlines to survive is because airlines provide and support the economic development of countries. So what countries will need is a viable airline industry when we get out of the COVID-19 crisis. So it's really to help to the survival of the airlines in this very unprecedented crisis.
And that is Albert Tjoeng, and he is IATA's Asia spokesperson.